Hello and welcome to Arnie's Short Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Ghostly Rider of Compton Bay. Holly Arnold had always been drawn to the shadows where others feared to tread. A paranormal investigator by trade, she had spent years chasing whispers of the supernatural, her life a tapestry woven from threads of curiosity and courage. Now, as the ferry sliced through the grey, restless waters of the Solent, she stood at the railing, gazing at the Isle of Wight emerging from the mist like a dream half remembered. The island's chalk cliffs loomed ahead, stark against the bruised sky, and somewhere beyond them lay Compton Bay, her destination, her obsession. Legend spoke of a spectral horseman galloping along its shores under the cover of night, a figure shrouded in mystery and sorrow. Holly was determined to unravel his story, to peer into the abyss of his past and, perhaps, set him free. The cottage she had rented crouched near the bay, a squat stone sentinel weathered by centuries of salt and wind. She unpacked her gear, notebooks, a recorder, a flashlight, methodically, as if preparing for battle. The air inside was damp, heavy with the scent of the sea, and though the windows rattled faintly in their frames, Holly felt something else, a presence, intangible yet insistent, watching her every move. Sleep eluded her that first night. Instead, she pulled on her coat and stepped out into the darkness, drawn to the beach as if summoned. The moon hung full and luminous, bathing Compton Bay in an ethereal silver glow. Waves crashed against the shore, their rhythm a relentless heartbeat. Holly walked along the sand, her boots sinking slightly with each step, when she heard it. Hooves. Distant at first, a faint echo carried on the wind. Then louder. Closer. She spun toward the cliffs, and there he was, a horseman, charging out of the shadows. His tricorn hat and flowing coat marked him as a relic of another age, perhaps the 18th century, and his steed was a magnificent beast, its mane whipping in the breeze. But as he neared, Holly's breath caught. She could see through him. His form shimmered translucent, a phantom etched in moonlight. He galloped past, close enough that she felt a frigid gust, his face a mask of anguish, before he vanished into the night. Holly stood rooted to the spot, her pulse hammering. She had faced spirits before, restless souls in crumbling manors, echoes of grief in forgotten graveyards, but this was different. The horseman's sorrow clung to her like damp fog. She knew then that she had to uncover his identity, his tragedy. Only then could she end the haunting that bound him to this desolate shore. The next morning, Holly sought answers in the village. The Smuggler's Rest, a weathered pub perched near the bay, buzzed with the low hum of locals. She slid onto a stool at the bar, and the bartender, a grizzled man named Tom with hands like knotted driftwood, eyed her curiously. "You're the one asking about the horseman, eh?" he said. Holly nodded. "I saw him last night. I need to know who he is." "Been riding these shores for centuries, they say. Some reckon he's a smuggler, double-crossed and cut down. Others say a highwayman who met his maker too soon. No one knows the truth. It's just that he shows up when the moon's high. Any records that might help? Try the library in Newport, old papers, journals, that sort of thing. Or talk to Mrs. Jenkins up the road. She's seen more than most." Grateful, Holly finished her pint and set out for Mrs. Jenkins' cottage. Wildflowers choked the garden, and the old woman greeted her with a smile that crinkled her withered face. "Come in, dear," she said. "Tea?" Holly settled in, the warmth of the fire's stark contrast to the chill she still carried from the night before. "Tom said you know about the horseman." Mrs. Jenkins chuckled. "Oh, I've seen him plenty, galloping along the beach, always on moonlit nights. There's a tale, you know, about a lad named Edward Montague, lived here in the 1700s. Loved a girl, Elizabeth, but she was promised to another, a rich brute who wouldn't take kindly to rivals." Holly leaned forward, her recorder whirring softly. "They planned to run off together. Edward rode to meet her one night, but he never made it. Ambush, they say, and killed. His body vanished, swallowed by the bay. Maybe Elizabeth couldn't bear it. It threw herself off the cliffs not long after, so he's searching for her. Could be, or maybe he wants justice. Hard to say. With ghosts armed with a name, Holly drove to Newport, the island's heart. Hours bled as she sifted through brittle newspapers and faded ledgers, her fingers stained with dust. At last she found him, Edward Montague, a horseman of local renown, vanished in 1763. A brief account mentioned his love for Elizabeth Howard, daughter of a merchant, and her betrothal to Lord Reginald Blackwood, a landowner known for his cruelty. Rumours swelled that Blackwood had Edward murdered to secure his claim, but no proof ever surfaced. Ollie's mind raced. If Edward's spirit lingered, it was tethered to his unresolved fate, his body unburied, his killer unpunished. She returned to Compton Bay, determined to find evidence. The cliffs towered above, their jagged edges softened by dusk, and the caves below beckoned like open wounds in the earth. She explored them one by one, her flashlight cutting through the gloom. In a narrow cavern, half hidden by tide-worn rocks, she struck gold. A rusted sword lay buried in the sand, its blade chipped but unmistakable. Nearby, bones jutted from the earth, human, clad in tatters of ancient cloth. And then, glinting faintly, a locket. Holly pried it open with trembling hands. Inside was a miniature portrait of a young woman, her dark hair framing a delicate face. Elizabeth. A shiver ran through her, and the cave seemed to darken. She closed her eyes, and suddenly she wasn't alone. The air thickened, and the world shifted. She stood on the beach, but it was different, untamed, the cliffs sharper against a storm-leaden sky. Two figures faced each other near the water, Edward tall and defiant, and Elizabeth, her eyes wide with fear. "Edward, we must go now," she whispered. "I'll not let him take you," he vowed. A shadow loomed. Lord Blackwood emerged, his sword gleaming. "Traitor!" he roared. Edward drew his own blade, shoving Elizabeth aside. Steel clashed, sparks flying in the dim light. But Blackwood was ruthless, his strikes relentless. Edward faltered, and with a final thrust, Blackwood drove his sword through him. Edward crumpled, blood staining the sand, and Elizabeth's scream pierced the night. The vision snapped shut, leaving Holly gasping in the cave. She clutched the locket tighter. Now she knew. Edward had died here, betrayed and abandoned, his body hidden to erase the crime. She arranged for the remains to be moved, buried properly in a churchyard under a simple stone, Edward Montague, 1730–1763. But the haunting persisted. She saw him again the next night, his spectral form galloping past, and changed. Burial wasn't enough. There was more to do. Back in the library, Holly found Elizabeth's diary, a fragile volume tucked among forgotten shelves. In it, Elizabeth wrote of their secret meeting place, an ancient oak near the cliffs, where they dreamed of a future together. Holly located it that evening, its gnarled branches clawing at the sky. The wind howled, a storm brewing on the horizon, and she carried the locket and diary with her. At the tree's base, she set the locket down and opened the diary, reading aloud, "My heart belongs to Edward, now and forever. If fate denies us in life, I pray we find each other beyond it." The air grew cold. Hooves thundered. The horseman appeared, his pace slowing as he approached. He dismounted, his ghostly form solidifying just enough to reveal the man he'd been, young, resolute, heartbroken. Then, from the tree's shadow, another figure emerged, Elizabeth, radiant in a gown of mist. She reached for him, and he for her, their hands meeting in a burst of light. "Thank you," Edward's voice whispered. They embraced, and the light flared brighter, swallowing them whole. When it faded, they were gone. Silence settled over the bay, broken only by the distant crash of waves. Holly lingered a moment longer. At the tree's roots, where none had been before, 2 white roses bloomed, their petals entwined. She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek, and left them there, a testament to a love reclaimed. The next day, as she packed to leave, Holly walked the beach one last time. The sun broke through the clouds, gilding the sand, and the air felt clean and burdened. She knew she'd return to her investigations, but for now Compton Bay was at peace. Edward and Elizabeth, reunited at last, had taken their haunting with them, leaving only stillness in their wake. The end. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.